We've heard so much about the obesity crisis.
We certainly put the younger generation at risk of being the first in the history of our country to have a shorter lifespan than their parents.
Being overweight used to be socially unacceptable, but now it's ballooned into something dangerous.
Americans are heavier than ever, with the obesity epidemic only getting worse.
And America's former Surgeon General says eating too much is deadlier than the terrorism of September 11th.
Obesity is the terror within. It is destroying us, destroying our society from within.
Really? Destroying our society? Well, Eric Oliver is a professor of political science at the University of Chicago and the author of Fat Politics, the real story behind America's obesity epidemic. So you're saying it's fat politics, not a real epidemic?
Yes, the source of America's obesity crisis is not McDonald's, it's not fast food, it's not some obesity virus, it's not because we watch too much TV or drive too much, it's America's public health establishment. Weight loss doctors, public health officials have set overweight and obesity at arbitrary and very, very low standards so that someone like myself, for example, I'm overweight. They've greatly inflated and exaggerated the risks and the connections between weight and all of these other diseases. And what I think what's worse is they've set up this arbitrary standard that somehow or another being thin means being healthy.
And when we talk about fat, and you said you're classified as fat, let's break that down. Government bases its claims about Americans being overweight on data it gets from something called a BMI index. It's derived from a formula where your weight is divided by your height, squared, and multiplied by 703. The government uses it to determine whether someone is underweight, normal, overweight, or obese. But it's not really a reliable health or body fat measure. George W. Bush is quite fit. He exercises all the time, but he's 6 feet tall and weighs 194 pounds. The BMI formula says that makes him overweight. People magazine's sexiest man alive in 2009, Johnny Depp, is also overweight. The BMI formula classifies California Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger as even fatter. He's obese. And Tom Cruise is obese by the formula. So this formula would appear to be pretty stupid to me if it's classifying Tom Cruise as obese and you as overweight.
Well, I'm glad you think so. But yeah.
And how does that happen?
Well, the interesting thing is it started with insurance data. So there were life insurance companies, and they wanted to figure out sort of what to charge for, for premiums in terms of their clients. And body weight at the time in the 1940s and the 1950s was one of the few things that they could actually track. And it's very easy because you can ask somebody what's their height and their weight, and you put it together. And there is a correlation between obesity and a lot of these other conditions. But that doesn't mean that being overweight or weighing a certain amount or having a certain body mass necessarily causes these conditions.
All right, well, let's take this argument to your opponents, the people I call the food police, though they don't seem...
Let me give you two very simple answers then, John. Number one...
And this is John Banzaf, a lawyer who...
And I find it very interesting that you're going for health and scientific advice to a political scientist. I don't think you do that when you get sick. Could you not find one single reputable doctor who could come on and tell you with a straight face, being obese does not increase your health risk? Secondly, BMI...
Well, he didn't say
Let me finish, John.
Well, you made an accusation here. Being obese doesn't increase your health risk?
Listen, John,
but does it or doesn't it?
I'm not a medical doctor, but I was trained in statistics. The question is risk. Let me give you an example, and this is a classic example in statistics. We know that when people eat more ice cream, the murder rate goes up. Does that mean eating ice cream makes people more likely to murder other people? No. People eat more ice cream when the temperature's hot in the summer months. And the summer months are also when people are out on the street and more murders get committed. But right now, according to the logic that's offered by these folks, it's eating the ice cream which is causing the murder. And when we calculate these so-called risk factors, all we're really doing is calculating an association between, a body mass here, and all of these other conditions.
So all of these government organizations and the federal government who maintain that obesity increases risk don't understand this point, and they're all hung up on your ice cream example.
I think
you understand it? All of them don't understand.
Let him answer that, please.
They may understand the point, but like I said, they interpret the data for a very self-serving purpose.
But if I may say two things, body mass index is not a final diagnosis. It's a non-invasive, very practical, low-cost initial screening. So you go further.
Obesity may be co-symptomatic of a large number of genetic or other metabolic problems that are going to relate in some other conditions. And they use that because, Mimi, as you said, BMI is very easy to measure. It's very hard to bring people in and test their heart rate, to monitor their physical activity, to monitor what they're eating all of the time. And we use BMI as a stand-in. But the problem with this is basically it's saying that everybody should be thin, that there's this uniform standard of what health should be.
No,
and
weight rate.
All right, but let me just end with one point. There was a recent study that said thinner people don't live as long as people who are slightly overweight.
Right now, the statistical evidence suggests that if you're over 65, the people who have the longest life expectancy among people who are over 65 are people who are technically overweight.
Just more food for thought. I thank you, Eric. And Mimi, sorry to interrupt. We're out of time. John.